Well, this is it. Number one on WJJD's Top 40 survey, Greater Chicago, July 9th, 1956. Pat Boone from the Dot record label. I almost lost my mind. Pat Boone was extremely popular in the 50s, and although he has left a trail of, at best, ambivalence as far as people's attitudes towards his music. And some of his songs, like April Love, I'll admit I can only take Pat Boone in small doses. But this record's different, though. I Almost Lost My Mind is a bluesy R&B record, and Pat Boone emotes this record well, sings this record very well. He's done some R&B remakes. He's done Tutti Frutti, and I believe he also did Good Golly Miss Molly. I know he did a couple of Little Richard records. He covered a couple of those. So he's not afraid to cover a standard R&B record. I Almost Lost My Mind was cut back in 1949, recorded back in 1949 by Ivory Joe Hunter. His version went to number one on R&B in 1950. It started out as a 12 bars blues record. And loads of people have covered this record. Ferlin Husky, Johnny James, Albert King, Eddie Cochran, Bill Black, one of the pioneers of rock and roll. One of Elvis's early sidemen. He played on That's All Right Mama. One of Elvis's early hits, recordings from the Sun record label, Bill Black did a version of this record. When I Lost My Baby, I Almost Lost My Mind by Pat Boone. The thing you got to understand about the 50s, a later generation would view the plane crash that killed Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper as the day the music died. The people who grew up in the big band era, the people who were in their 40s by the mid-50s, even in their 30s, when they heard these rock and roll records by Fats Domino, Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, to them, that was when the music died, from their perspective. Growing up listening to Bing Crosby, Glenn Miller, Pat Boone, with his ballads, particularly songs like April Love, was a throwback to that earlier era that they grew up in. Like the Vic Damone record I played earlier in the countdown. Also Teresa Brewer's Sweet Old Fashioned Girl. Not necessarily going to offend a 44-year-old in 1956, because it reminds them of the standards they grew up with. Thus, Pat Boone was a reassuring parent, was reassuring to a lot of parents. The teenagers liked him too. Some of them might have liked Elvis better, but Pat Boone was really huge in the 50s. This guy had 58 charted hits between 1955 through 1964, including 6 number ones. Love Letters in the Sand, Pat Boone's biggest hit, probably arguably his biggest hit, was number one for 7 weeks. And the song I Almost Lost My Mind was number one for a month in 1956. The parents hated Elvis. They hated Bill Haley. With the swagger, the sensuality, that was too much for a lot of them. And then you got the racial component thrown in the racially conscious 50s. But Pat Boone, sweet, right there in the middle. Just, oh God. I could hear a 36-year-old saying, in 1956, my God, I can't stand Elvis. That's not music these guys are putting out. But Pat Boone, okay, he's acceptable. I don't mind my children listening to Pat Boone, but I don't want them listening to Hank Ballard and the Midnighters. I don't want them listening to Elvis. Number one, Pat Boone. I Almost Lost My Mind on WJJD survey.